Donald Trump isn't just dismantling our government and attacking our Constitution. He's also embarrassing our country every single day. It's humiliating that our stupidest citizen is our president. And I felt that especially today as Donald Trump delivered the commencement address at West Point. And it wasn't just humiliating because of what he said, but also because of what he was wearing. And not just for the people there, but for Melania Trump as well, who Donald Trump took a shot at in just a shocking moment during a rambling address. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we get into Donald Trump's commencement address at West Point, I want to start with the latest announcement he made about our military, this ridiculous clip right here.
The president will further honor our military next month on June 14th when he hosts the 250th anniversary of the United States Army with a grand military parade celebration right here in our nation's capital. President Trump will be joined by veterans, active duty troops, wounded warriors, Gold Star families, and patriotic Americans from across the country to celebrate our heroes who have kept us safe. Tickets for the parade and the celebration are available through the America 250 Commission's event registration portal. It will be a truly historic and special day for our country.
Of course, Trump and his entire administration, Carolyn Levitt, they're going to frame this as a military parade, honoring our troops, honoring our veterans, honoring our fallen heroes. But of course, we know Donald Trump doesn't care about those people, those he views as suckers and losers. This is one big $100 million plus parade for Donald Trump's birthday. This is what dictators do. This is a military parade for Donald Trump. And it's especially gross considering how little he cares about our service members. He has no actual thought about how to protect them. It's kind of just all a joke to him, as we saw during his speech, which we're about to get into. But before we do, I want to check out the other big military announcement made by Donald Trump, which just shows how much of a joke this is.
Ultimately, this right here, the Golden Dome for America, is game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. Mr. President, you said we're going to secure our southern border and get 100% operational control after the previous administration allowed an invasion of people into our country. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland.
He clearly saw this in a movie. I think someone said he saw this in an episode of The Simpsons, and that's kind of the Trump presidency. It's the TV president, both in his behavior and the idiotic ideas coming out of this administration, but it just shows how out of touch they are. And clearly Donald Trump is as well, because during his commencement address, he just started rambling about nonsense, but one specific topic of wives came up, and yeah, he humiliated his own. Take a look.
He built Levitt towns. He started as a man who built one house. Then he built 2, then he built 5, then he built 20, then he built 1,000, then he built 2,000 and 3,000 a year. And he got very big, very big. He was great at what he did. You see him all over the country, still Levitt towns. This was a long time ago, but he was the first of the really, really big home builders. And he became very rich, became a very rich man. And then he decided to sell. He was offered a lot of money by a big conglomerate, Gulf and Western, big conglomerate. They didn't do real estate. They didn't know anything about it, but they saw the money he was making. They wanted to take it to a public company. And they gave him a lot of money, tremendous amount of money, more money than he ever thought he'd get. And he sold his company, and he had nothing to do. He ended up getting a divorce, found a new wife. Could you say a trophy wife? I guess we can say a trophy wife. It didn't work out too well, but that doesn't work out too well, I must tell you. A lot of trophy wives, doesn't work out. But it made him happy for a little while at least. But he found a new wife. He sold his little boat and he got a big yacht. He had one of the biggest yachts anywhere in the world. He moved for a time to Monte Carlo, and he led the good life. And time went by, and he got bored. And 15 years later, the company that he sold to called him, and they said, The housing business is not for us. You have to understand, when Bill Levitt was hot, when he had momentum, he'd go to the job sites every night. He'd pick up every loose nail. He'd pick up every scrap of wood. If there was a bolt or a screw laying in the ground, he'd pick it up and he'd use it the next day in putting together a house. But now he was spoiled, and he was rich. He was really rich. And they called and they said, this isn't for us, this business. We do other things. Would you like to buy it back? We'll sell it back to you cheap. And they did. He bought it. He bought it. He thought he made a great deal, and he was all excited. But it was 15 years later. He lost a lot of momentum. Remember the word momentum. And he lost everything. It just didn't work. He lost everything. And I was sitting at a party on Fifth Avenue one night, a long time ago, and you had the biggest people in New York, the biggest people in the country, all in that party, and they were all saluting each other, how great they were. They were all telling each other, I'm greater than you. Gets to be really, gives you a headache sometimes. But they had all these people, they're telling their own stories about how fantastic. A cocktail party, and I looked over, and I was doing well. I was invited to the party, so I had to be doing well. I was very, very young. But I made a name in real estate, and I looked over, and at the party, sitting in a corner all by himself, nobody was talking to him, was Mr. Levitt. He had just gone bankrupt, lost everything. He had lost everything, his home, everything. And I went over and talked to him because he was in the real estate business, and I loved real estate. And I said, hello, Mr. Levitt, how are you? He said, hello, Donald, it's nice to meet you. He knew me from being in the business. I said, so how's it going? He goes, not well. It's really not going well, as you've probably read. It's been a very, very tough period for me, son. And I said, so what happened? It's just anything you can do? He goes, no, there's not a thing I can do. He said, I'll never forget. He said, I've lost my momentum. I just didn't have it. I used to have it, but I lost my momentum. So it's a story I tell, and you have to know when you have the momentum, but sometimes you have to also know when you've lost the momentum. And leaving a field sometimes, leaving what you're doing sometimes is okay. But you got to have momentum, but you have to know if that momentum's gone. You have to know when to say it's time to get out. And it's a very sad story. I remember that story so well, like it was yesterday. Fifth, you have to have the courage to take a...
So I don't even know how to begin to unpack that, that rambling mess. But we do have to start with the most important aspect. Trump talking about how sometimes trophy wives don't work out. Could he be more obvious in what he's saying? We recently saw a report out of the New York Times talking about how uncomfortable everyone at the White House is with just how little Melania is there. It's a very sensitive topic. They won't talk about it. They won't address it. They won't even look at it. But Melania Trump is never at the White House. So clearly Donald Trump is thinking about his own trophy wife and she's going off in this speech. But can we also point out the fact that he's wearing a campaign hat as president of the United States at West Point delivering their commencement address? How disrespectful. It's just gross. And again, this goes back to what we talked about in a previous video yesterday, how Carolyn Levitt said that Donald Trump got to attend his crypto scam dinner in his unofficial capacity, just his personal capacity. But I thought Donald Trump was, as every president is while they're president, always president. And isn't that his legal theory behind immunity? Right? If Donald Trump is in his personal capacity sometimes, and maybe he's committing crimes in his personal capacity and doesn't get to do whatever he wants. But that is a different story. There is no through line in terms of what is legal and what is not in this administration. They do whatever they want. And that includes with trophy wives. If you're a foreign trophy wife, you're happy to come in. But if you're a U.S. citizen, yeah, Donald Trump will probably deport you. Yeah, U.S. citizens. They're fine. Foreign trophy wives for Donald Trump and his rich buddies, they get to stay. It's ridiculous. And it was called out in a takedown of Marco Rubio right here.
What happened? The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Ostrich's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Osterk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will
clear.
continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary.
Right,
let me reclaim my time, because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Why did the administration, Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country
Rubio,
apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed.
I know there is so much constantly to cover, but the fact that he is deporting citizens, children with cancer, I feel like I can't say this every time, but it feels like it should be the number one issue. There's so much that feels like it needs to be the number one issue, but we're going to try to talk about it all. We're not leaving anything on the table. We're calling them out every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.